This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on a choice, get on a mandate, get it on. Welcome to the best hour or so in the universe. It's Reasonable Doubt. I'm Adam Carolla over here in Los Angeles. Mark Garrigus is over there in New York City. In studio, James O'Keefe, founder of Project Veritas. So much to talk to James about. Mark, you're looking relaxed in your Hawaiian garb.
Yeah, my son has kind of influenced my wardrobe on Fridays or Fridays to come when this drops, whenever this drops, which I think will be Saturday. So we'll pretend I'm being very tropical. And look at O'Keefe, looks like he's practicing law or something. What's going on?
Well, I sort of am.
James is a very, as they would say, divisive character in today's pop culture. And polarizing. He goes out and tapes and audio and video, mostly video, I would say. Folks from CNN and New York Times and other places that have a political leaning but sort of call themselves news agencies, and then sort of gets them to have a beer, relax their guard, and speak a little more candidly about what the real agenda may be other than just news. Is that a correct assessment?
I think so. And, truth-telling in times of deceit is considered revolutionary, right? That's what they say, George Orwell said. But, yeah, we've exposed a lot of corruption, what people are trying to keep private. We try to make it more transparent.
And I don't let me put words in your mouth.
James, how old are you?
36.
Do you remember Creditkarma or Alan Funt? Was that before your time?
That was a little before my time, but I've gone back on YouTube and looked at the Mike Wallace stuff that he used to do in the 1970s and 80s. People used to do this a lot more in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and then something happened, I guess, in the last 20 to 30 years.
I was going to say, was it the I meant to look this up before when I heard you were coming on. Remember that? I don't know if it was ABC or Oprah and the beef and all of that.
Yeah, there was
a lot of litigation.
Food Lion. That was the Food Lion case where I've read a lot. There's been a lot of lawsuits about this, law review articles. Food Lion was a grocery store, and they put hidden cameras in the wigs, and they exposed, this is ABC Dateline, Diane Sawyer's team, in 1992, put hidden cameras and exposed they were bleaching meat and doing things, and Food Lion's stock tanked, and so ABC got sued by this grocery store, and they eventually won on appeal, millions of dollars later. So litigation is so. You said I look like I'm litigating. Litigation is so central to what we do at Project Veritas because I've gotten sued so much. We've never lost a case, and now we're going on offense and suing people for defamation.
Well, let's talk about that. Mark, for your next book, I think I have the title, I Meant to Look This Up. That would be a great title for your next book. All right. So
another conspiracy theories I discuss on a weekly basis.
Yes. So their contention is this is cooked. This is edited. This doesn't represent us. Your thing is I rolled a camera. I didn't cook it. I didn't edit it. This is what your people said. How is it that these things can be dismissed as, conspiracy theories or Russian collusion or whatever? And I guess we're living in that time where they have Hunter Biden's laptop, but it's Russian somehow disinformation. I feel kind of the same way about you. You roll a camera.
Yes.
How is it cooked? The words are coming out of their mouth and you're not editing it.
They say these things, but it's hyperbole. They say, well, you edit. Everything is indeed edited. Doesn't mean it's edited deceptively, but they'll say these things because this is what they do. And we've been sued, but we've won. And in all these cases, these judges look at the raw and they go, oh, this wasn't edited out of context. I think it's...
I was going to ask you that. How far have you had evidentiary hearings where a judge will do that? What you just described, because that. And
yes.
Remember, what was the last one you had?
It would take me an hour to go through all the cases, but we've been sued over a dozen times, and we went on summary judgment in federal court. These are Article III. These are federal judges, right, on the bench for life. And we won on summary judgment, like a teachers union guy. We caught him on tape at the bar. This is a guy named Steve Wentz in Kansas. And he says, I, beat the shit out of students, and, I'll say I'll beat your ass. We record him saying this. He sued me for defamation. It went to a federal judge on summary judgment, and the judge said, there's nothing out of context here. And we won the case. But the original allegation still stands on Google when you look at my Wikipedia page. But Adam, they can never actually name the specific edit. They just say O'Keefe lies. Okay, give me an example of something that we've edited. They don't have any.
Well, as I've learned, and maybe this is a little deeper dive into law, but as a guy who does a show called Crank Yankers, you're not allowed to call people from Los Angeles to Alaska or Nevada. There's probably 8 or 10 states where you do not have to announce, I'm recording you. You can just call them and record it, and then later after the call, you have to get their permission. They have to sign off on it. But there are states...
You want to broadcast it.
Right. But there are many states where when they pick up the phone, you have to go, is it okay to record you to put you on air? So the argument is kind of hard to make with the content because the content speaks for itself. You're rolling a camera. What's coming out of the person's mouth is coming out of the person's mouth. Does it take a turn toward the, yes, I may have said that, but you had no business recording it?
Right. This is a huge issue. It's one party versus two party consent. I think it's 12 states. It's illegal. In California, it is illegal to record someone unless you're in a public place. So we do undercover work.
Or there's an extortion or
extortion. So as a journalist, I record people at Starbucks. So can a reasonable person overhear you, or would the court
the
conclude?
Expectation of privacy if you're in a restaurant or if you're in a, like you say, a coffee shop or something like that is generally, I've litigated this. You're absolutely correct. In California, there are those exceptions which to some degree swallow up the rule. Has anybody, when you've won on summary judgment at the trial court level, has anybody then appealed it to a circuit court?
No, there's an extraordinary moment in one of our cases. This is in North Carolina, and we were sued for defamation. By the way, I've been sued so many times. We've won every suit. So now I've started to sue people, which is another topic. Hopefully, we get into.
Do you get insurance? Do the insurance companies cover it, or you have to?
I'm limited in what I can say publicly about this, but I fought my insurance company and won. And most of the time,
good for you, because they look for every angle to not defend.
Most of the time, I have to pay out of pocket, and we're talking. $5-6 million a year, whatever it ends up being. Because we don't settle lawsuits. And that's what makes this so special. Like I could have settled this one case for whatever, $50,000, and I ended up spending $2 million just on principle. And you asked the question about that, and it went all the way to the end. And we won on a directed verdict in federal court.
Did they give you a jury, or did
they gave me a jury, but the federal judge gabbled it and said, something called a directed verdict, which means that
at the end of the case of whoever was suing you, the judge said there's not enough here to.
There's no way a reasonable juror could ever conclude that O'Keefe is guilty, and being in that federal courtroom was an experience. It taught me, to behave obviously ethically, but I've had my reporter notebooks opened up. I've had my journalists deposed and their emails examined. And what I've learned is I got to behave so ethically all the time, not hide anything from anybody, which is people, the rub on me and Project Veritas is that we're unethical. We spend more time thinking about the ethics of what we do and the legality of what we do and how to do good journalism. These people at CNN and the New York Times, they don't behave ethically. They're not deposed. They don't have their emails gone through. And I think it's a bit of projection for them to say this stuff about us because that's what they do. They do doctor the tapes. They do lie. They do conjure up fake source material. So we got to hold them accountable via litigation.
Are we in a new era? Mark, I'll open this up to you, and then James as well. We talk about Nicholas Sandman and that case. I have not heard much about that lately. I think CNN settled probably been some other publications that have settled. I've talked to Dr. Drew about this a lot with all this sort of canceling people and firing people for no good reason and cutting off their Twitter and doing all that stuff. He says the only answer is litigation. Like, these people are running around like drunken banana republic dictators, and somebody's going to have to bring them down to earth. You're not allowed to take 16-year-olds standing in front of American Indians, cook the tape, and then push it out there and destroy this kid's life just because you have an agenda. And asking them to do the right thing and play nice is not going to work. They need the threat of litigation.
I think I'm going to say the answer is kind of contained in what James was just saying, at least in my experience, having done this for a period of time. Only certain people, the old expression is litigation is a rich man's sport. The problem is insurance companies do a strict cost-benefit analysis. I bet you in some of James's cases, they've advised him to settle just because they don't want to pay the lawyer's fees. And a lot of times you have to fight tooth and nail with the insurance company to not do that. And when you do it on principle, it's a very expensive proposition. I don't know, James, have you? I
could write. I'm literally writing a book about this. I don't think anyone's. I may be the only chairman of any media company that that has never actually settled a lawsuit. I'm talking over $20 million budget. I have tremendous experience, and what I've learned is these people are smart. They came out of the box suing me after the Acorn thing I did with Andrew Breitbart. They sued me. They've sued me in every case. They actually got a bunch of plaintiffs together to organize lawsuits against me, and the whole purpose of these lawsuits was for them to depose me, to get my emails, and then leak that to the New York Times. So in one of these cases, the American Federation of Teachers, the whole thing was just to do discovery on me. And then try to get some dirt, I guess they're thinking that I'm dirty, and then leak that to the New York Times, which they did. Nothing that incriminating. So, these people, they play for keeps. So what I realized, and I realized this recently, is you're right, Adam. The only way to actually hold them to account is to get them in front of a judge, because they don't care. They have no shame. They don't believe 2 + 2 = 4. They don't care. There's no way to shame them. So the only way to do, you have to put them in front of some higher authority like a judge, put them under oath in a deposition where they're on video, there's exhibits, and no one has done this. So we sued.
But James, isn't is the problem when you say you came to this realization recently? Yeah, it's a trial by fire, because basically you had to have the wherewithal, the budget, or the. I had
to become a CEO of a company just to be a journalist, because if I were to settle a lawsuit, first of all, you're right, and the economics of this are unfathomable to people. You said it's a rich man's sport. Right. I'm not independently wealthy. I started this organization in my dad's garage with nothing. But I realized in order for me not to settle the lawsuit, I have to go ahead and raise $2 million. So I have to create a foundation. I have to go out and get donors. But now we've sued the New York Times for defamation, and this is a New York State court. And the judge said it was the New York Times that engaged in deception and had behaved unethically. And the judge ordered the suit to go to discovery, which now in the Nick Sandmann case with the Native American, Nick Sandmann settled the case.
Right.
I don't know why he did that. He could have deposed these Washington Post reporters under oath. And
it's interesting because what you're describing, Adam went through back in, what year was that, Adam, with the patent litigation?
Oh, I don't know, 2012 or 13 or something like that.
Yeah, because it's kind of where I bonded with Adam, because he finally figured out exactly what you're talking about. There is this game that is litigation. They count on you to basically cry uncle.
That's right.
At a certain point. And when you don't, they don't know what to make.
They don't know what to do. They don't.
They have no idea what to do.
We're suing Twitter for defamation and in New York State court, because if it goes to the Ninth Circuit here in California, we're not going to have as much fortune. And Twitter had sent me a letter saying, sort of threatening, this is like a few weeks ago, you must drop this lawsuit or else. It's almost like, you're right, they just want to break your will. So I'm in this, and I know we're talking a lot about the law, and we're a little bit in the weeds here, but I think it's important because litigation is so central to the First Amendment right now and what we're doing. And I've realized this.
I agree. I know that I come to it from the prism of, obviously being a lawyer, but I don't think people quite understand the fight that is happening now over the First Amendment. I mean, you and I probably couldn't be more diametrically opposed politically, but when it comes to the First Amendment, the hypocrisy is wild.
My politics is, again, I'm going to keep quoting this book, 1984, which is the year I was born, 1984, George Orwell. And George Orwell writes...
It was the year after I started practicing law.
Well, there you go.
Careful.
I mean, George Orwell writes, freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 = 4. If that is granted, all else follows. So people say, what are your politics, O'Keefe? I say, well, my politics are, I believe in the freedom to say that 2 + 2 = 4. Does that make me a conservative? Okay, if you want to brand me that way. But in the New York Times case, the extraordinary thing, Adam, is that so we sued New York Times for defamation. We get past this motion to dismiss.
Is Harmeet Dillon your attorney?
She's the attorney in the Twitter lawsuit representing.
Okay.
This is a different woman named Libby Claire Locke. And we get past this motion, and the New York Times admits.
James, can you tell the viewers exactly what the defamation was that you
Yeah, we did these videos. Veritas did these undercover videos into these Somalis in Minnesota, and there's this unbelievable tape. This is in September of 2020. And this guy, Mohammed, is in his car with all these ballots. He's got, dozens and dozens. And he goes, I have all these ballots. I am breaking the law. I do not care. No one hold me accountable for nothing. It's crazy. It's like a South Park episode of what voter fraud would be.
Right.
Now, he filmed himself. I did not film him. We grabbed it from Snapchat. This is a private Snapchat. And we publish it. The New York Times does a A-section news article saying that Project Veritas is part of a disinformation campaign with deceptive video. And I was beside myself because Facebook banned our video because the New York Times wrote this headline. And, of course, all these tech companies use the New York Times as their fact-checking mechanism. So what I realized was, oh, my God, there's that oligarchy. It's not that the New York Times and CNN have power themselves. It's that Google and Twitter and Facebook, which have infinite power, use. So I sued the New York Times for this statement that the videos were fake and videos were deceptive. Mm-hmm. It gets past this motion. And here's the most amazing thing. It goes to court. The New York Times admits in the response, we got the facts wrong. They're admitting in the lawsuit documents that they were in error, but they haven't yet updated the article.
Right.
They admit in the lawsuit that they got it wrong. The article still stands, and Facebook still has the video banned. I mean, is this not 1984?
Well, I think...
And it's just the only time you hear about it is when it's one particular side's ox getting gored.
And it cost me $300,000 just to get to the motion to dismiss phase of the lawsuit.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting because you may not have started out as a lawyer, but you're going to end up knowing more about the law than most lawyers. And it kind of reminds me of the mom whose son has the rare disease. They end up being an expert on it and end up telling the doctors what to do at a certain point because you end up taking such a deep dive into this subject, whether it's your son's health or for you, litigation and law, that you end up having a almost better understanding of how the system works than not Mark Garagos, of course, but a couple of the flunkies on the other side of the courtroom.
I meant to look it up.
He goes up against. I was thinking about you, James, as you were coming in. I've seen many of your videos, and I have a suggestion / or maybe a question / suggestion. You record a lot of these folks, and some of them you have to change their voice up.
Right.
You have to disguise their voice in a way that people won't recognize them, because you're trying to preserve their anonymity in this thing. I would say that as a viewer and a listener, I would, instead of and you can tell me about the legalities of this, instead of morphing their voice into something that's sometimes hard to understand, I would simply transcribe it and re-record it with a clear voice that wasn't their own.
I think that's a good idea.
You should definitely do it. I have some experience with this, again, from doing shows like Crank Yankers, which is when you're watching the tape is compelling, but when the voice gets to a point where it's borderline unrecognizable, the message gets diluted a little bit. And I don't think there's anything legally, I don't think the law has any problems with this. I would simply transcribe what those guys are saying and get somebody with a very clear, possibly English, although that would probably distract people. Just get someone with a very clear voice to literally just go into a booth and lay it down. Just read the actual transcript. Do not muss with the transcript. Don't change a word, but just put it in there. It'll be much more presentable and palatable.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
I'll take it under advisement.
Please do. All right.
I was texting with Gary, but maybe I'll tease it and I'll read Gary's revenge here. And I'd love to see if Gary can find it, the Somali tape. But before I do that, Roman, our sponsor.
Oh, yeah.
Squeaky doors, clogged sinks, finicky engines. When things break, you take care of it, right? But when something's off in the bedroom, you try not to think about it. Go to getroman.com/doubt now for a free online evaluation and ongoing care for ED from the comfort and privacy of your own home. A U.S. licensed healthcare professional will work with you to find the best treatment plan. If medication is appropriate, it's sent to you free with 2-day shipping. Getting started is simple. Just go to getroman.com, getroman.com/doubt, and complete an online visit. Take care of your ED without leaving your home. Gary?
That's absolutely right. Go to getroman.com/doubt now, and you'll get $15 off your first month. It's really time to take care of your ED, and remember, get started today, and you'll save $15 off your first month. getroman.com/doubt.
So let me ask you a sort of global zeitgeist question. Obviously, CNN, New York Times, and many of these so-called news outlets do not like Project Veritas. And then obviously many politicians who side with the New York Times and CNN do not like Project Veritas. And then more and more, I think they're showing their hands, a big tech does not like Project Veritas because they're on the same side as CNN and Adam Schiff. What about society at large? What allies do you have? Who is it pretty much just breaking down between Fox and CNN and Democrat and Republican? Is that just the line, or is there anyone on the other side of the aisle that sees the truth in this? There are some people on the Democratic side who go, hey, I'm old school, I'm liberal, and the truth is for all.
I think that's, by the way, good question. The question about allies. I was actually thinking about that this week. I was thinking, wow, I'm making enemies with a lot of these institutions, all the tech companies, all the newspapers, which have power insofar as the tech companies use them. I think there's 10 years ago, I don't think people thought the FBI was crooked. Right. But now there's almost like this populist understanding of how crooked almost everything has become.
Right.
And there's a cognitive dissonance in the hosts on CNN, like they don't think that these institutions are crooked. Like the New York Times did a front page hit piece on me last week, probably because I'm suing them and winning. And it was just so obvious what they were doing. They were trying to foment a federal inquiry into me, and it was the exact opposite of the way it ought to be. These New York Times Pulitzer Prize-winning reporters were working in hand in glove with the institutions they ought to be investigating. And I think people get that. And we did this Facebook story, whistleblower. Now we have whistleblowers come to us. And the man that we disguised the voice said, screw it, James, I'll go public. He did. He was fired. He raised $500,000 in 2 days. $500,000, not on GoFundMe, because GoFundMe would have just taken his money and, banned it. We used a Christian website called Give, Send, Go. So that to me indicates that the people are behind us. I have a quote here from a guy named Gary Webb, who is a journalist in the 1990s. And we talked about British sports cars. He drove a TR6, by the way, this journalist.
Wow, I'm all ears.
Gary Webb said, quote, I was winning awards, getting raises, lecturing classes, appearing on TV shows, and judging journalism contests. And then I wrote some stories that made me realize how sadly misplaced my bliss had been. The reason I'd enjoyed such smooth sailing for so long hadn't been, as I'd assumed, because I was careful and diligent. The truth was that in all those years, I hadn't written anything important enough to suppress, said Gary Webb. And there's a movie called To Kill a Messenger, a film about his life. So, to a certain extent, this is the crisis of inside the soul of someone like me. You do the right thing, you're going to make a lot of enemies with people who give you that power and that approval. You're always trying to walk that line.
Is it? I think Mark will resonate with this. I was reading.
It's amazing because I think I know what Adam's going to say. I'll let you say it.
Well, I was just in here talking with Dr. Drew a little earlier, and we're talking. You take the whole thing and look at it through the lens of COVID. There's just a report that came out that said hydroxychloroquine was effective or is effective. You were called a heretic if you championed hydroxychloroquine a year ago. They're now the Wuhan lab leak. Well, that seems to be a theory that most people are signing off on. You were xenophobic, racist, heretic, and a Trumpian if you said that a year ago. If you dared to go outside without a mask, people look down their nose at you. It was a pretty lonely place to be on the wrong side of COVID a year ago. So here's the question, and I experienced this myself, and Dr. Drew's experienced this, and Mark to some degree as well, which is you know what you know, you trust your instincts, you feel like a person that's examining the evidence and then drawing a conclusion, yet you have to move out onto an island where you're essentially a pariah in your own community. And
Which is, in your point, and I guess circling back to what you were saying, what used to be investigative journalism, you were not a cheerleader, number one, for the government. You were the person who was supposed to hold the government accountable. You were supposed to challenge authority. You were supposed to.
Well, these journalists have become so reliant on their sources that they almost work hand in hand with their sources, and in many ways, the so-called leak to the New York Times reporter is basically a press conference where it's even worse because we don't know who they're talking to and what the motivation is of the supposed leaker. Whereas with Veritas, I show you the people's lips moving. Even when I disguise the voice, they eventually come public. But I think central to this, discussion is really about fear. And, I don't think we should make decisions based on fear. You talked about being on an island. I've been there. I've lived it. So have you. I've lived it, really in a profound way. But the truth is we're not alone, right? We feel like we're on an island, but there are so many people right now that are behind us, increasingly so. I mean, everywhere I go, I'm sure you get this too. There's just so many people that support us, and they have no voice, so they live vicariously through us. They do have they buy ink by the barrel, and they have the power of tech. But I don't think we can make decisions based upon fear. I think we have to figure the most effective course of action and not worry about it. You just have to be effective and pragmatic.
Well, here's a question I'll pose to both of you. I really feel like, and I think just today I was hearing stories about that whole kerfuffle about Trump walking across the street to the church and holding the Bible up, and there was all the story universally was he called out his stormtroopers and they billy clubbed everyone and kicked the peaceful protesters out of the park so he could get a photo op. That entire story's now been investigated and debunked. The park system was clearing the church and the park 2 days before Trump went over there. It was already something that they had been working on. And basically all the major outlets that reported that Trump sent his goons over to beat up peaceful protesters and talked about it in a big way for a long period of time, they all just have egg on their face now. They all just have to sort of do retractions or admit they were wrong. They never really admit they were wrong, but they do a kind of a version of it. And I think they've done incredible damage to their reputations. I think if I do this little test, I got a bunch of young guys who work with me, and I've said it before, but I'll say it in front of James. If I went to these guys 5 years ago and said, if you saw something on CNN, what would you think? They'd go, I believe it. I say to them, all right, now today, if you saw something on CNN, what would you think? They'd go, I'd have to investigate. I wouldn't believe it initially. I'd want to. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying I would want to go figure it out. Now, if you're a news organization or you're a transmission mechanic, that's bad for business. You know what I mean? If you've proven yourself as a transmission mechanic and that you give a guy an estimate, you looked at his car and he goes, okay, I heard you. I got to go across the street. There's another expert over there. I need to talk to him. I'm not so sure. You've been wrong on a lot of these synchro meshes over the last few years. I feel like the house of cards is coming down kind of fast. I think a lot of that is to do with guys like James and other people that are speaking out and doing independent stuff. Well,
I don't think they have shame. That's the one part of what you said that I sort of disagree with.
Oh no, I don't think they have shame at all.
That you're right. That going back to this 1984, which everyone needs to reread, listen on Audible. They believe in double think, right? That, you've heard of that thing where it's double think, where 2 + 2 = 5, and they draw these facts and then they forget that they ever said them. It's just this cognitive dissonance thing. It's a psychological.
But eventually, when you take a look at the top 20 ratings for cable news and CNN comes in number 20th, at a certain point, it's a business decision. I mean, at a certain point, the rubber's going to meet the fiscal road. You know, when you're losing viewers, subscriptions, eyeballs, you know, at a certain point, it'll come down to a financial thing. You'll not be able to just be stoic and doubling down.
But you said
bullshit.
But you mentioned that some people still believe it, and I think that is true. And
they definitely believe it. It's all about the piece of the pie. It's the size of the pie. I believe that 10 years ago, all right, let's just go back 20 years ago, CNN. People believed 97% of the pie. Then you go to 2015, they were down to 61% of the pie. Post-COVID, with all the revelations that are coming out now and again, the Harmeet Dillons and you and Sandmans and all this kind of stuff that's going on and all the retractions and all they got it wrong, they're getting down into the 30 percentile of the pie. Still a lot of pie, but it ain't the size of the pie they used to currently inhabit.
I wrote a book called American Pravda, and one of the points that I made, because I read about the Soviet Union and was fascinated to learn that almost everyone in the Soviet Union knew that the Pravda was the Russian, fake newspaper, fake news.
It means truth.
Truth in Russian, Pravda. So I wrote a book called American Pravda, and my hypothesis was that in the Soviet Union, everyone sort of knew they were being lied to, and they participated in the lie, and they privately, maybe very privately, joked about it. Although they had to be careful about that because they'd be ratted out by their own children potentially. But in this country, it seems like you say 30% of the pie. Maybe it's 30, maybe it's 50%. But such a large amount of people look at CNN and go, that's the truth. And the New York Times, and they say in Manhattan, in New York City, people treat the New York Times like it's gospel.
I know, but let's talk about Manhattan. People are leaving Manhattan to go to Florida. People are leaving California to go to Texas.
Do you think they're bringing their politics with them?
I hope they've left their man buns, their multiple bracelets, and their politics as they go. I don't worry about that as much as certain people do. But what I'm saying is you're Manhattan, so you can always go, you're New York City. We're the greatest city in the world. And that's great. That can last for a long time. But at some point, you're looking at a graph. And when you're seeing the graph is not going the right direction, there has to be a course correction, or somebody has to say. I mean, you see it in New York right now. You have the mayoral race or gubernatorial. I can't remember the mayoral.
See it? No, it's the mayoral race.
And
it's already started to upend. I'm watching it here, and it's fascinating to watch. And part of building on what James was saying, part of the thing that you tend to, I've been amazed the last week, we haven't talked about it yet, is, there was such a brouhaha about the Department of Justice, for instance, speaking of Trump, defending Trump and trying to substitute in on the Jean Carroll lawsuit. And that was, people were aghast. It was the worst thing they'd ever seen. And Bill Barr was trying to substitute in. And just this week, the current Department of Justice, led by Merrick Garland, not only doubled down, they took it to the Court of Appeal here in New York, Second Circuit. And they're still saying that the Department of Justice should substitute in. And I don't see people, where is the outrage over that? Because the outrage in the legal community, at least, when Barr took that position, when people were apoplectic. Why aren't they apoplectic now when this administration is doing the exact same thing? And actually, to my mind, even worse, they're in the Second Circuit Court of Appeal trying to get an appellate decision to substantiate that. It's mind-boggling to me, and goes back to what I was saying before. Which James, I tend to agree with your observation here. Journalism and the reporting of journalism, they've become cheerleaders for a side as opposed to what they were supposed to be before.
And further, they project onto me what they do. This is the genius thing that I'm never going to reduce myself to accusing my enemy of something bad that I'm doing they're not. But that's their effectiveness. They're able to project on me, say, you're not a journalist. And there's one moment, Mark, in a deposition where I was being deposed under oath by a lawyer for teachers union guy, and he says, reveal your source. I said, well, I have a constitutional right not to reveal my source. I'm a journalist. He's like, you're not a journalist. You how dare you compare yourself to the New York Times? I said, well, under the law, the First Amendment applies equally to my behavior and their behavior, regardless of where they work. They rely so much upon their own reputations, which they give to themselves. Well, you must trust us because we're the New York Times. But what if you lied? Well, you still must trust us because we're the New York Times. But you admitted that you lied. But we're the New York Times and you're not. And at a certain point, how do you argue with irrational? How do you argue?
You don't. It's a logical. I mean, it's a basic logical fallacy.
It's the law of non-contradiction. You said in the documents that you made a mistake and you're not correcting it. So I have to go before it. So this goes full circle. That's why I have to go to court, because it's the basic law of non-contradiction. You said you got it wrong, but you're still not correcting your article. So therefore, I'm going to bring you to a judge. Mm-hmm. And you hope that there's some semblance of justice in this country. I know there's some corrupt judges, but there's also some reasonable judges.
Well, let's get caught up on the case against Twitter, which I'm interested in, because and again, for me, it's scary that I always sort of circle back to the Hunter Biden laptop thing. I think it's the New York Post breaks the story. Immediately, all the usual suspects just pile on: fake news, disproved, Russian disinformation. The scary part of this, as we were talking about earlier, you get ex-heads of the CIA and the FBI to go on camera and go, this is totally non-credible, this is Russian. You have guys that were in the deepest bowels of the CIA also explaining that this is fake news, again, based on nothing. It's sort of like the Wuhan lab thing. Like, it wasn't the Wuhan lab. Based on what? Based on you don't need to know. That's what we're telling you. But Twitter pulls it off. Everyone turns on them, and it appears it's a laptop, and it appears that the information on it is whatever was on the laptop. I have no idea why Twitter and everyone else needed to turn on everybody, but that was when you see what's on the laptop, that could have affected the election in a big, big way. You know, that was a sort of 11th hour surprise that could have swung it a different direction. And it was just completely dismissed and oppressed and deplatformed. So, you know, Twitter's going to have some accountability. Big tech's going to have some accountability here.
Right.
How is your lawsuit going against them? Let me tease that because I got a 30-second Geico here to hit.
All right.
Do you rent your home? Well, you do one or the other, and you work hard. And I'll tell you what makes it, it's going to make it easy for you. Bundling. Take those policies, your homeowners, your renter's insurance, put along with your automotive policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around the house. So go to geico.com. Get a quote and see just how much you could save and how easily you can save when you get your bundle working at geico.com. So Project Veritas and Twitter.
Yep, we sued Twitter for defamation. Your audience is probably familiar with the so-called Section 230 thing, which is they're immune from being sued for what people say on their platform. But they're not immune, and Harmeet Dillon represents me in this particular one. Mm-hmm. They're not immune from what they themselves, the Twitter executives, say, and they said that I created, quote, fake accounts. James O'Keefe has never created a fake Twitter account. So I sued them for defamation. Now, what happened was we do these huge tapes on CNN. You probably saw the CNN control room director, Charlie Chester was his name, and he's talking about fear cells, death cells. We got to get the COVID deaths up to get more ratings. These videos were trending on Twitter. By the way, Project Veritas had already been banned on Twitter, but was trending on Twitter, and I was still on Twitter. And right at the height of the third video drop, trending number 2 on Twitter worldwide was the tape where they're talking about helping, this is CNN director speaking on hidden camera, helping Black Lives Matter, not reporting on Asian American crimes against Asian Americans, discrimination, racial things, he was saying, and Twitter yanks down my account. Right when the videos were, I was too effective. Veritas was too effective. And mind you, Adam, this is not me opining about things. This is me quoting someone. In other words, I'm reporting what I was told, as a journalist should. I don't show you anything unless you could see the guy's lips moving. And this guy talks, and they banned.
It's so funny because Adam and I complain all the time that I wish there was a place I could go to get raw footage or get the
literally.
Spend a lot of time on C-SPAN because that's the only.
I'm fighting for the right to relay to other people what I've heard. This is the most fundamental concept, ever. And Twitter bans me for reporting what the guy said. Didn't ban the guy for what he said. No, they banned me for quoting the guy. Good for Twitter. So I said, Harmeet, there's no legal theory in the United States to hold these tech companies accountable because of this 230. However, in this instance, the Twitter executives falsely said that I had created a, quote, fake account. I sued them for defamation. We are going to soon get to they're going to file
Harmeet's case?
Harmeet's the lawyer representing me. So Twitter's going to file this motion to dismiss. I think they're going to file this motion to dismiss. They sent me a letter threatening me. I got to take down this, you got to stop suing us, which indicates to me that they're scared.
Right.
They want me to not sue them. They want me to break my will. They want to stop. They want to bankrupt me, etc. I said, I'm not stopping.
Well, as soon as the patent trolls told me to stop talking about the case and them on the air, I, of course, tripled down on talking about the case. I don't know, Mark, you'd be disgusted if any of your clients sort of showed people their soft underbelly that way. It's like a prize fighter saying, I can't take body shots, so just keep it above the shoulders. Well, of course, here comes a hook to the ribs,
Right.
But here's a bigger sort of global question that I sort of keep asking. What is Twitter's, we obviously see they're motivated in a direction. It doesn't seem like a great business model for them, big picture. But is it a great business model? Is it simply I run Twitter, here are my politics, I got more money than God, go out and do my bidding? and I don't care if we lose a few bucks or a few lawsuits along the way? Or what is the motivation behind it from a business standpoint?
This is a really these are very good questions. You're asking the right questions.
Hell, I may be a journalist.
Very difficult, very profound. I mean, there's a book by this guy's on the left, but I happen to agree with a lot of what he's saying. Noam Chomsky, called Manufacturing Consent. I think it was 1987. And this book,
Chomsky,
Chomsky,
a lot of things. Yeah,
Edward Hermes and Noam Chomsky, 1987, Manufacturing Consent. And I think what Chomsky, in trying to answer your question, why do all these networks? By the way, before there was Twitter, there was CBS, ABC, NBC, and Time Magazine. There's always been this, direction. And they say it's really more about a symbiotic relationship with those in power. So rather than investigate the FBI or investigate these organs of power, they just align with them. And there's a kind of statist or an establishment direction that these entities go in. And I would think of Project Veritas as being truly, where I'm not a beat reporter. I don't rely upon getting access to this source that feeds me. In fact, that's why we do undercover work, because I just burn every source I talk to because I'm undercover. So I think it's not so much politics. I think it's more a reciprocity of interest. And these tech companies and these newspapers and CNN is aligned with the powers that be. It feeds them. By the way, they put all these people. Who's the guy? McCabe. Didn't he get a slot on CNN?
Yeah, Andrew McCabe. Yeah,
yes.
and
doesn't that speak to what I'm saying? I mean, they just put these the guy that lied, Clapper.
The model really has been out of D.C. for years. You have the so-called K Street lobbyists. You've got the large law firms, depending on whether they're on the left or the right and which administration gets in. That's who becomes the Solicitor General. That's who goes into DOJ. That's who becomes the Article 3 judges that we're talking about. It just swings back and forth. Whichever administration is there, there's the usual suspects who then jump in, or their mentees jump in. And then when the administration shifts out, it's the same group basically that's kind of coming back in again.
I think what the general populace at large doesn't understand, and Mark and I have discussed this many times, he understands it well, is the experts. I'm holding my fingers up in quotes. So what they do is they go, hey, how about this whole Hunter Biden laptop thing? And then James Clapper, who's the head of the FBI, comes out there, or CIA, or wherever it is, along with some other ex-CIA guys, and goes, I got a letter here signed by 120 ex-CIA guys that says this is Russian disinformation. And then you go, well, that guy's an expert, and he's got a letter that's signed by 100 former CIA agents saying this is nonsense. And this is Russian disinformation. And then anyone who's watching CNN goes, well, how are you going to argue with the ex-CIA guy and the 100 whatever? It's the same thing they were doing with like this COVID stuff all the time.
They increasingly rely upon their reputations. And the way I see it is that anytime you only rely upon your own reputation and don't give us any actual evidence, you're withdrawing currency from your ATM. And that's why you said the pie is getting down to 30%, because they're not actually depositing into their ATM. They're not showing us any evidence. This Clapper guy lied under oath about the Snowden stuff. He said that we're being spied. If I had lied under oath, or you had lied, we'd be in jail.
Yeah, Gary, can you find that document? I think it was Clapper and Brennan's the other guy.
No, it's interesting when you say that, your description about the expertise, because the reputation, in court, you want to see somebody's CV. And before they can testify, they have to kind of give their qualifications. All that does is get them to be deemed an expert. In court, with evidence, they still have to withstand cross-examination. They still have to be asked questions. They still have to hang their thesis has to hang together. And that is where we have stopped. We kind of stop at the here's your CV, here's your resume, here's your pedigree, but we're not going to ask any questions. We're not going to cross-examine.
When the New York Times case, the headline about me, which again I'm suing the New York Times for defamation and winning, the headline was, experts, just like what you said, experts call Veritas a, quote, coordinated disinformation campaign. The New York Times had done the very thing they accused me of. They had coordinated with this Stanford researcher group, basically they created this narrative. They quoted these, quote, who are these experts?
Well,
they're
they're the fact checkers. They're the folks that, Tom Cotton 14 months ago says, I think this thing came out of Wuhan, and it's like debunked. It's CNN has debunked it because their experts debunked Tom Cotton. They didn't explain how the virus couldn't have got out of the fucking lab. They just explained that it has been debunked. It's literally. I wish I could do this when I argue with my wife. I could just have some guy in the next room, and I could just go in the room, shut the door, smoke a cigarette, and come back and say, "Yeah, Gerald said you're wrong." So moving forward, like that's basically what they do. They just go debunked by the experts. And by the way, it's not debunkable because there's no evidence. There is no there was no journey that they took to gather evidence and to discuss things or to do any of the things that Mark must do on a daily basis when he's making a case.
Right. It's just astonishing. We've discussed it here so many times, but it's astonishing to me that what masquerades as discourse in the public square or argument in the public square when, as James, to quote you, as I preach this all the time. I say you can never get away with this in a courtroom, but for some reason people think that it's fine and dandy to do outside of a courtroom, and I think it's unconscionable.
I mean, if you look at some of the deposition tapes of the people that are on the other side of our depositions. I go give speeches. It's like a comedy. You do comedy. It's high comedy when you put these people under oath. I mean, if I showed you these tapes, you guys would literally laugh out loud, because when you put people under oath, everything changes. You can't act like a fool. You're cross-examined for 8 hours. So I just think it's important for your audience to know that litigation is, unfortunately, I never thought I'd be a litigator, but in order to be a journalist, I had to learn how to be a litigator. And I haven't lost a case. And people think, well, you haven't lost a case. Is that because the judges all had your back? No, it's because we don't settle. And I think the facts and the law are always on our side. And as long as you don't settle and you fight them all the way to the end, you will win. There still is justice in this.
It's an incredibly hard battle, because if you have insurance, if you're in a business and you're doing a cost-benefit analysis, you got insurance companies don't want to pay the lawyers, want to settle, the whole term nuisance value. I laugh. When I first started practicing 40 years ago, nuisance value was 10 grand. Nuisance value now in some cases is $1.5 million. I mean, it's just talk about inflation.
Well, I've had litigators tell me that in this New York Times case, they're going to try to pay me off. I've had many people say they'll do anything not to go to trial with you, James. And Nick Sandman. I guess on one level, I do understand taking the money. I don't know how much money he took. That would privileged. But the New York Times, I tell people, if the New York Times offered me $100 million, I tell them to go to hell, because I believe the discovery, that is to say, deposing them under oath, is worth more than that. I think it's worth infinity. I think it's what it's all about.
Is there a timeline? And Mark smiled like he may have known the amount of the Nicholas Sandman.
I don't know.
I can read my jury.
Yes, you can.
The New York Times filed.
Tell me off the air, would you please?
Yes.
The timeline.
We're going to talk cars off the air. Prices of collector cars.
Yes, and work on your game face or your poker face. Would you over
My
there?
poker face is you two entertain me too much.
I'm worried the opposing counsel is going to read too much on you. So is there a timeline as we wrap this up? Is there a timeline
on
and
litigation?
And a prediction? Yeah,
on everything, or just the litigation?
Twitter and New York Times.
The judge ruled that proceeds to discovery and to trial, but the New York Times is appealing that and trying to get an emergency and stay injunction to prevent me from doing these things until it goes all the way for years on appeal, and that will be decided in the next 30 days. And Veritas intends to start releasing videotaped depositions of New York Times reporters in the summer and the fall.
I hate to rain on your parade, but My guess is they come in and they stay it, and you're going to be tied up in the appellate court
for 2 years. For 2 years,
yeah.
You think that's very rare to get that? By the way,
I know. Exactly right. I'm going to make that prediction. I'll
my
tell
prediction. My prediction right here and right now is that by the summer and the fall, I will be releasing videotaped depositions of New York Times reporters. Mark my words.
If that's true, we'll have you back on to do it.
All right, I'll take you up on that.
I'm interested in that, but how do you legally release depositions?
It's not privileged. It's all public. Some of the stuff is proprietary, but litigation for the most part, all these proceedings are public. Federal courtrooms you can't film, but depositions are filmed, and as long as they're not marked privileged, you can publish them.
Gary,
yeah, and what they try to do is which is ironic. In this litigation, you'll run into this or probably have a million times. They try to put it under a protective order, meaning you cannot release it.
Well, they can try, but we'll fight them on that. And I think there's some great irony in
That's what I mean. And could it get more ironic that they want to do the discovery under a protective order in a First Amendment case?
No, my prediction is that and by the way, we're releasing another whistleblower, Adam, next week. This individual is on-air talent for a news network, and he or she is going public while employed at that news network. I think it's a big deal.
Are you disguising the voice?
No, this person's going right away.
Then I have no notes. Gary, did you find anything about that thing that was signed by...
We're still trying to read about it. It doesn't appear there's anything that we can show, and given the way we're recording right now, it wouldn't be possible to show all three of you anyways, but I'm still on it.
Or is my memory given way? Maybe
I don't think that's the case.
Maybe it was another case.
I don't think that's the case. I think there was just a lot released, and I'm digging through the articles.
All right, let me tell you about Creditkarma. Creditkarma money checking accounts where you can win daily instant karma purchase reimbursements on items up to $5,000. Just pay with your debit card. If you win, you'll be notified on the spot, and your instant karma cash will be added back to your spend account. Creditkarma money has already given away over $3 million to over 50,000 members. Open an FDIC-insured account for free. No minimum balance required. No overdraft fees, and free withdrawals at up to 50,000 RPMs. RPMs. I'm thinking about cars. ATMs. That engine would blow up unless it was a rotary. 50,000 ATMs. When you make a purchase between June 8th and June 30th, you'll be automatically entered to win $1 million. Right, Gary?
Right now, visit creditkarma.com/winmoney to open your free account and start winning instant karma. Go to creditkarma.com/winmoney to sign up for free and start winning instant karma. That's creditkarma.com/winmoney. Instant karma is sponsored by Credit Karma. No purchase necessary. Exclusions and terms apply. See rules. Banking services provided by MVB Bank Incorporated. Member FDIC. Maximum balance and transfer limits apply.
Well, another robust and interesting conversation was had on this fantastic show. Mark, you're going to go off and have a cocktail and a breakfast burrito?
It's the perfect time to go do a little. Somebody just dropped off a DJ 1942 as a thank you because I gave her a good recommendation for her job. So.
All right. You can go to adamcarolla.com and see me all over the place. This Friday, Saturday, I'll be in Golden, Colorado doing the Buffalo Rose stand-up live podcast there, June 18th, 19th. So it'll be this Friday, Saturday. Go to adamcarolla.com for all the live shows. Mark, what do you have?
We got Prova in GCT, Prova at Moxie, the Capri Hotel with Naya open up this weekend in the Hamptons. We've got Casa Tropicana in San Clemente, V Palm Springs. Go visit Gigi's, the restaurant there. Engine Company 28 downtown LAX, and Tenny Mediterranean Tapas. And James, you come back here when you get one way or another. We'll either have the deposition or we'll talk to you about the stay.
There's going to be a lot of things happening, so
you can stay tuned. Go to the website is projectveritas.com for all the updates and information. Until next time, this is Adam Crawford, James O'Keefe, and Mark Garagos saying mahalo.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.